Wow, that's a long question. Woo! Yeah, we'll do this anyway. Question is, when is it time to cut off all contact with somebody and it not be withdrawing? Let's see. My marriage, I want to be sure I haven't done this one. My marriage of 15 years ended 4 years ago, and I know now what I did to doom it right from the start. The last 4 of those 15 years were sad, and I was feeling very needy. That's when I found warmth and acceptance in a male friend, which is understandable, not right, but understandable, with whom I fell in love, and it was mutual, as he was surprised in an almost identical situation in his own relationship. So he was apparently married too. I had always stayed away from such situations, as had my friend, but I guess when imitation love has gone awry and there's no real love either, it leaves such an unbearable ache to connect. And we did initially remain just friends for a couple of years before we started to feel that pull. It all came out, and I told my husband. I had told him over the last years of our marriage that something had to be changed because we no longer had much of anything. But he said, it will get better. Most things don't just get better. You have to work at them. It took this confrontation with the truth to make it real. This was the catalyst that brought it home that our problems were not going away on their own. We went to counseling, but my husband chose to end the marriage. His choice. I was willing and wanted to try to make it work because I believe in the promise I made, even if I didn't feel particularly loving toward him. If I'm honest, I will say that also say that besides fear, anger, guilt, and sadness, I also felt some relief over his decision to leave, and guilty. My boyfriend, also told his long-term live-in partner, and she went hysterical, which I understand, though she did already know, but I guess was in denial about their relationship. They're still together, though he is unhappy, and she is still upset but tries to pretend otherwise. We still have contact, though his partner doesn't know about it. Many times I have told him not to contact me, and eventually he does again, and we end up talking on the phone and then spending time together. We've never had sex, not because we didn't have the desire to, though we have kissed, cuddled, made out. I'm embarrassed to be telling this to you. That's a clue, by the way. If you're embarrassed to tell somebody about something, it's not usually the right thing to do. I don't want to continue in any kind of dishonest relationship. Well, there's a piece of honesty, actually. If you're in a dishonest relationship, that's a clue to not continue in it, even if it was a platonic friendship, which it isn't. Good for you. It's not. It's not a platonic relationship. It is a sexual relationship, even if you haven't actually progressed to sex. I admit I have not known what real love is, and that this is a prime example of how not to do things. Well, you're doing good in the honesty department here, at least in telling it. You're not doing real good in the honesty department with him. Recently, I read the Real Love book and became a member on the website to learn more. I see that I've been very selfish and admit I was actually angry at him for not leaving his partner. You're doing really good at telling the truth, and had bitterness toward him. It was hard to see this in myself and to admit it. I told him this about what I'm learning with Real Love. He took the book and is reading it. He was touched when I was able to tell the truth. He admits his own selfishness in this whole thing as well. Now I want full honesty in all my life and in all my doings. I do not want to see him behind anyone's back. Good for you. I accept his choice to stay where he is, and no longer am holding it against him. I've also let go of the hateful feelings I had toward his partner. Part of the reason that I can is that I desire to, and especially because I've been experiencing love through telling the truth to some women friends, which has been working transformations within me. I want a real relationship based on real love. In the past, I admit, my reason for cutting him off was to stimulate him to take action and leave his partner. Oh, that is so honest. Oh, that's wonderful. She was trying to get him to leave his partner to be with her. Most people can't get to that kind of honesty. Yes, the real selfish to the bone reason. In other words, manipulation. I saw that it was not real love because I had anger toward him and was disappointed in him. Wow, what a revelation. And I got to tell you, wow, what honesty. Whew. I'm searching my heart now and I'm trying to be totally honest. Well, you're doing pretty well. I want to show him unconditional love, but how? I thought that might be to keep the lines of communication open instead of totally cutting him off and running or withdrawing as I have before and tend to do anyway. But under the circumstances, might it not be more loving to cut all contact? I'm not quite sure of what I should do here. Can you show me the real love perspective here? I do want to do what's best for everyone involved. What can I say to him that will get my point across? I know that my actions have to back up what I say as well, and I really wish to follow through. Help me. I want to stop messing this up and get on with my life. There's a real big difference between running and withdrawing. Running is something that you do reflexively without really consciously making decisions. It's something that you just do automatically and to protect yourself. So running is done without much thinking, and running is done in fear. Whereas withdrawing is a conscious decision done not to protect yourself, but is done to maximize the love in a situation. So in the past, you have a lifetime of running to protect yourself. Here, what you need to do if you want to have the most real love in your life is to withdraw, completely separate yourself from this man because he's already in a lifetime committed relationship. You didn't actually say he was married, but he has a lifetime partner. Same thing. So I'm going to call it a marriage. He's with a wife. And so to continue a relationship with him is just dishonest. It's wrong. You need to completely withdraw yourself from him. And I mean completely, like 100%. No phone calls, no visits, no emails, nothing. And so you need to, I would just send him an email. No phone call, not a thing. Send him an email that says, I've made a mistake. I've prolonged this relationship far longer than it should have been. I'm not capable of conducting this kind of relationship. I need to move on with my life. I need to learn more about what unconditional love is. I need to learn to become a more loving person myself. This is not your fault in any way. It's been my fault to stay in this relationship. I recommend that you learn more about unconditional love so that you can apply it in your relationship with your present partner. That's up to you, of course. But in order for me to develop more unconditional love in my life, I can't be involved in a relationship at this point in my life with anyone. It's not about you. I need to go learn more about real love, period. So I've got to go do that by myself. I need to go tell the truth about myself and feel more unconditionally loved by other women. I can't be in a relationship with a man, any man. So I can't be exchanging emails. We can't be doing phone calls. We can't have a relationship of any kind. I appreciate your supporting me in this, but this will be the last communication that we have. That's the end. That is a conscious, loving, caring decision. It's quite different from a fearful, reflexive, protective decision. That's running. Now, this is withdrawing so that you can move on and maximize the real love in your life, and it's definitely the next decision you need to make. So, very nice job of you telling the truth here about yourself. Like, gee whiz, first class, stellar stuff. Now we've got a question here that was asked, I think, a week ago. And I'm going to read through, let me know if anybody's having video or audio difficulty. I don't think so. But this is a question that was asked a week ago. There's a lot to this question. So what I'm going to do is read through the entire question. Then, because there's so many parts to it, I'm going to go back and answer the parts of the question because there's so many parts to it. So, hang on. First, the entire question. I've been reading a book which describes how abusive people will actually feed upon spouses who are docile and passive. I've discovered with my ex-husband that the more I tried to love and see him by remaining quiet while he verbally attacked me, the more enraged and attacking he became. After months of this behavior, I finally told him that he had to stop. But then he would find other ways to attack. Once he even resorted to deliberately making annoying noises inches from my ear as we walked through an airport concourse upon returning from a real love conference, which, after we met with you, he decided was an evil experience. We finally separated, and I found myself clinging to him for months afterward. Then, after reading this book on how abusive people feed on passivity, I realized my husband, we'll call him Fred, had been abusive all this time, but I just couldn't or didn't want to see it. Physical violence is an obvious landmark, but had I known earlier about how passively aggressive, abusive people can actually feed on passivity, and how my trying to be quiet and wrong and admitting my mistakes to him might have been viewed by my ex-husband as a green light to continue his bullying, long sentence, I would like to think I would have ended the relationship much sooner than I did. At what point does a relationship cross the line from simply being one filled with emptiness and fear into an abusive one? Where is the line on the spectrum of attacking where an attacker becomes an abuser, and thus it becomes inappropriate to remain with such a person? This is a really important question. So, let's go back to the beginning. And if you have comments as I answer it, let me know. I've been reading a book which describes how abusive people will actually feed upon spouses who are docile and passive. I discovered with my ex-husband that the more I tried to love and see him by remaining quiet while he verbally attacked me, the more enraged and attacking he became. Now, pay attention here, because there's a lot of real importance. The way this is worded is a setup for failure. And people all over the world fall into the trap of the way this question is worded. Notice the phrase, abusive people. I've been reading a book which describes how abusive people, nobody will even stop the questioner who phrases the question in this way. And I mean nobody will. And because nobody stops the questioner in the way that this question is asked, everybody falls into the trap and just falls right down the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland, and they're all screwed. It puts us in the world of victimhood, and it puts us on the field of death, and so everybody's doomed. As soon as we get on the field of death, everybody dies. It becomes an exchange of getting and protecting behaviors and imitation love. It becomes all about attacking and running. It becomes about attacking and victimhood, about power and safety. When we don't understand that, we're doomed to essentially rotate between different kinds of getting and protecting behaviors. We just try different variations, and that will never work. We have to get off the field of death. When we don't understand that we're on the field of death, we're just going to switch from one weapon on the field of death to another. And then no matter how skilled we become at switching from one weapon to another, everybody still dies. We got to understand what I just said, or we're all dead. Now, let's see what she continues to say. After months of this behavior, what does she say? I finally told him that he had to stop. See what I'm saying? So instead of being passive, what does she do? She throws down the weapon of passivity, of acting like a victim or running, and instead she picks up the weapon that he uses, which is attacking. Well, I'll show you. I'll make you stop. I'll try controlling. I'll try attacking, which is the weapon that he's been using. We mistakenly think that the solution to being a punching bag, to being a victim, to running, is to, quote, stand up for ourselves. In fact, in assertiveness training, this is what people are taught to do. Well, don't you put up with that. You need to stand up for yourself. Oh, this is not going to work. This is the kiss of death. Don't let somebody do that to you. Instead, pick up a gun and shoot them. Yeah, that's going to really be great. So now we're exchanging one getting and protecting behavior for another. So instead of acting like a victim, now you're going to defend yourself in just another way. So we're exchanging one flavor of unloving for another flavor of unloving. So now you attack or control. You use yet another weapon on the field of death. And it never works. You want proof? Let's keep reading. In her letter. But then, predictably, he would find other ways to attack. Gee, surprise. As soon as she picks up another weapon on the field of death, what do you think he's going to do? He's going to reach over and find another one, or become more skilled at the one he's been using all along. Well, yeah. So he would find other ways to attack. Once he even resorted to deliberately making annoying noises inches from my ear as he walked through an airport concourse upon returning from a real love conference, which, after he met with you, he decided was an evil experience. Can you believe this? Here's this adult male, 40-something years old, walking through an airport concourse, making little annoying noises in her ear as she walks through the airport, like a fourth-grade baby. She has so frustrated him, or he is so frustrated, pick your use of terms, that all that he's got left to him is the armamentarium of a fourth-grade bully. As soon as you pick up weapons on the field of death, sweetie, you're going to get back amazing results. He does that. You decide to pick up another one. He's going to pick up another weapon. Everybody dies on the field of death. Then what happens? She says, we finally separated. Gee, there's a stunning surprise. And I found myself, by the time I get to the end of this, I'm almost, you don't know whether you should laugh or cry by the time you get to the end of these. After I've read enough of these, I don't know which to do. It's horrifically sad on the one hand, and yet it's a tragic comedy on the other hand. It's a tragedy of ignorance. People are repeating these same stories everywhere around the world. We finally separated, and then what does she do? She says, I found myself clinging to him for months afterward. Now, how sick is this? She separates from him, which means that temporarily she has an opportunity to get off the field of death with this guy, but then what does she do? She misses the exchange of imitation love. She misses the exchange of garbage with him so badly that she jumps right back on the field of death with him, using yet another form of getting and protecting, this time clinging. In the absence of real love, that's how badly we miss imitation love. It's an unspeakable tragedy. Then, after reading this book on how abusive people feed on passivity, I realized that Fred had been abusive all this time, but I couldn't or didn't want to see it. All she found in a book was a label to justify acting like a victim. Well, I could see how he had abused me all these years. Garbage, really. And I don't say this in a way to be unkind, but it's garbage. It's foolishness. We find books to label other people as monsters. Oh, he abused me. No, sweetie, he didn't. Really. Get over it. In fact, this whole email is about, well, see, I finally realized he was an abuser. No, he wasn't. He was empty and afraid, lost in pain, drowning, sunburned, stupid, ignorant, all of that. And in that condition, he lashed out at whoever was around him. You can be sure he did this everywhere he went. He did it at work. He did it while he was driving on the road. He did it at absolute strangers. He did it when he was parking his car to people that he'd never seen before. But he did it the most to the person who was closest to him, the person of whom he had the greatest expectations, the person who was insane enough, that's you, to actually promise him that she would love him forever when she married him. That was you. You didn't realize you were insane at the time, but you were. And you created such expectations in his head that when you didn't fill them, who do you think he was going to lash out at the most? You. And you really let him down. You didn't mean to. None of this was intentional. But again, he didn't abuse you. He was just drowning. And he wasn't drowning to you. So, it says here, after reading a book on how abusive people feed on passivity. What a terrible way to say this. No, it's not about abusive people. It's about drowning empty people. I realized that Fred had been abusive all this time. Nah, just empty and afraid. Physical violence is an obvious landmark, but had I known earlier about all this, blah, blah, and then there's all these technical terms, and I would have ended it sooner than I did. It's not about whether to end it, whether to put up with it. And then it says here, when does a relationship cross the line from one being empty and afraid and to an abusive one and so on. These are all excuses for when do I get to feel justified in being a victim. All meaningless. All of this becomes meaningless when we simply see that the other person is empty and afraid. So the real question is when am I going to take responsibility in my life for bringing more real love into my life so that I can see earlier that other people are drowning? That's the question. Now, just because somebody is drowning, do I have the responsibility for saving them? No, I don't. I have the responsibility for loving people as well as I can. Now, when other people are drowning, they can be pretty dangerous. Not abusive, dangerous. And if your husband is angry enough and hateful enough, it may be that you can't cope with his behavior while he's angry and hateful. Not abusive, just angry and hateful. Because his drowning behavior, if you're also in the water with him, you may not be able to live with a drowning person. At which point you may decide, while you're like this, I may need to be separated from you for a while I learn this, and then I'll bring this back to our relationship. But it's not while you're abusive. This change in perspective is huge. When I say to my partner, I'm not going to put up with your abusive behavior. Whoa, what an incredibly blaming perspective to take. as opposed to my saying to my partner, you know, I've never really been unconditionally loving in our relationship. And so I realized that lately. And while I'm in this position of learning how to love you, I've realized that I'm going to make huge mistakes. And rather than add further insult and damage and wounding to you and to our relationship, I need a period of time of, I don't know, a couple weeks or whatever. We'll figure it out as we go. I need some time where I need to be out of the relationship. I don't know, maybe, and I'll give you some options here in a sec. I need some time when I need to be more distant from the relationship so that I don't keep wounding you while I'm learning. And I've done this with lots of couples. Anything from, I'll tell couples for a period of, 2 weeks or 30 days or whatever, you're forbidden to speak to each other. That's one form of separation. Sometimes I'll tell couples they need to be in a separate household for 2 weeks or 30 days or whatever, so that the wounding can stop. Not because one person is abusive, but because these two have been drowning for so long, there's nothing they can say. They can't even say good morning. They can't speak without saying something that's ugly and attacking and mean-spirited. They don't do it to abuse the other person. They just don't know how to say anything that's loving. And anything that's not loving is damaging. So we're not going to do that anymore. So we separate them until they can learn to be more loving. And that's the perspective we need to get, is to learn to be more loving, not to make it about the other person. When does the other person cross the line into abusive? No. How do we learn to be more loving ourselves? And while we're learning that, do we perhaps need to put ourselves in a condition where it's safer, more conducive to learning to be loving? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But do you see the difference in perspective? It's huge. The question here, there's a couple of questions. From Mesa. So forming boundaries is just another form of being on this field of death. Yes, it is. When people talk to me about setting boundaries, terrible phrase. So I need to set boundaries for myself. No, you don't. The entire goal in any relationship is to further the real love in the relationship. Look what happens the instant. Everything that makes the relationship better is about real love. Look what happens the instant I say this to you. Now, I need to set a boundary with you. As soon as I do that with you and say set a boundary, there's no way I can use the word boundary without creating this kind of visual image. Is there? Impossible. And as soon as I say set a boundary, and I set this kind of visual and audio image with you, is there any way you can feel more loved by me? No, there isn't. It is impossible. So I don't see how you can use the word boundary and create more love in a relationship. It's not possible. So instead of talking about setting up a boundary ahead of time to protect yourself, you can't protect yourself and feel more loved. You can't protect yourself and make somebody else feel more loved. You just simply tell the truth about yourself. Just do that. Then, if somebody is consistently attacking yourself, you tell the truth that I'm not loving enough to be in this environment. And then you decide whether you're going to be in this interaction or you're not. It's a decision made from moment to moment and interaction to interaction. Why set up a boundary ahead of time? For example, people have called me and they've said, well, in our real love group, we're going to set boundaries that people can't use abusive language. I'm going, oh, then you're doomed. Why do that? In our group, if somebody uses a foul word, for example, then as soon as somebody uses a foul word, I would immediately say to them, by your using that word, you seem to be communicating a really intense feeling about whatever it is you're describing. So describe in more detail how you're feeling about that. Because using that word is a shortcut. It's an inarticulate, lazy way of saying what you're trying to say. So describe it in more detail. Tell me with more words how you're feeling about that. It actually shows more of an interest on my part in hearing what they want to say. As opposed to my saying, I accept you completely, except when you use that word. No, I accept them completely no matter what words they use. Whereas if I say, we have a boundary in this group, we accept you except when you use this word or that word. It just really makes people feel constricted. And you'll find that if you accept people completely, no matter what they say, they'll tend to express themselves in more articulate ways, and they'll tend to use those words less, not more. Here's the person who wrote that letter, actually. I found I could use the anger I felt as a victim to protect myself from the hurt of the relationship ending. Oh, see, that's just a really sweet piece of honesty. I also wanted to make my husband, this is the guy who made the little airport noises, a perpetrator in order for me to make sense of his choices. Sure. I have been so confused by someone choosing not to learn to be more loving. I needed it to make sense to me. Absolutely. And it seems to kind of wrap things up in a bow if you can make somebody a monster. Do you understand that? We love our monsters. Why did Hitler kill all those people? Because he is a monster. You see? No, let's not dig any deeper. Let's just label him as a monstrous person. Now we understand. You don't understand a thing. Labeling somebody a monster doesn't help you understand anything. You think monster is an explanation? No, let's spend a little time. If somebody's a monster, not only, it's actually better than that. Not only do we have an explanation, but now we feel vindicated. Because by comparison, you see, we become somewhat saintly. Because we have been hurt by the terrible person. And we have been sort of morally elevated by the experience. Because monsters hurt saints. And we have been rendered morally not culpable. We don't have to explain ourselves anymore. Well, you know, it's just not going to be that easy for us. It really isn't. We don't get to just say the boogeyman did it. We actually have to explain our behavior. We really do. Mesa says, so if there's an abuser, then there needs be an abusee, otherwise known as a victim. Oh yeah, we love to be the victim. And see, victims never have to explain anything. They are morally free. Actually, better than that, not just free. They're, like I said, they're above everybody else. And then the writer of the letter says, I did take responsibility. I got a coach. I made loads of real love calls and attended meetings and online chats and anything else I could. I read as much real love as I could get my hands on. My husband became more angry and attacking. Yeah. People who are attackers need somebody to fight them back. They need somebody to engage them in moral combat. And the more that you become involved in real love and take responsibility for your behavior, they begin to sense that they are out on a moral limb. And they don't like that. He made a choice not to work on the relationship. He rejected real love and the offer that Greg made to help us. Yeah, because Real love then finally labels you as an attacker. And you sit out there all by yourself. If your partner becomes more unconditionally loving, then if you're the only attacker and your partner begins to take responsibility for himself or herself and begins to become more honest and doesn't exhibit moral flaws, I mean, if the two of you are just duking it out and have mud all over each other, then you feel sort of like morally justified because you're just two people having a mud fight. But if one of you says, you know, I've made a mistake, and starts to clean himself up and starts to look, well, by comparison, if we want to just use the kind of the metaphor, starts to look whiter, starts to wash his clothes, and you're the only one with mud on him, if you're the only one who looks dirty, you've got to do something about this. You're either going to have to clean yourself up, or you're going to have to throw more mud on the other person. So your partner naturally is going to become more angry. I stayed involved with him, hoping if I could get filled up and love him, we could somehow find a way to save the marriage. He then started to date another woman, so I filed for divorce and accepted the end and am in a great deal of pain. But my wise friends are helping me see the truth and stay on the field of life. Hallelujah. Now, if this guy is dating another woman, been angry and miserable, stays on the field of death, why would you even be in a great deal of pain? Because when you invest a whole lot in another person, loss is still loss. It still hurts. We still grieve over what could it have been. We still grieve over all the time and energy we invested in somebody. It's still a loss. It still hurts. I mean, we grieved when we left the 6th grade. Even though it's time to move to the 7th grade, there's still that tear over leaving what we had. Anytime we lose something, there's still that sense of loss. I now see I have a long way to go. But I have faith, and I believe as I learn to be more loving, I will experience love from others and be less needy. Yeah, you will. Keep reminding yourself that what you lost was field of death. What you lost was garbage. Really, that's what imitation love is. But if all you've known all of your life is garbage, it really seems like a pretty big loss. It seems pretty real. It seems pretty painful. Okay. Great questions. By the way, we just got our DVD from the PBS pilot. So we've finally seen the final version, and that's what's going to go up on the, that'll be uploaded to the satellite to be downloaded to the PBS stations like the second week in January. So we're pretty excited at what we saw. It was really good. So we look forward to that being aired like second week, third week, probably second or third week of January. And we still need some short-term investors for that. So anybody knows of any of those, let us know. We're looking to get people probably 100% return on their investment in about a year. So let us know if you know people who can do that. We got a question here from somebody who talks about their boss being a bully. There's a lot of that. In fact, very common, to the point that I got an article from Andy here recently who said that there are 13 states now who are in the process of passing legislation, various stages of legislation, where they're going to make it easier and easier now to for employees to sue their employers if they're bullied at work. 1 out of 6 employees is presently being bullied at work, and 50% of employees report being bullied at work at some point over their career. Bullying is very expensive. Their productivity goes down hugely, and in roughly 60% of cases of people who are bullied, the natural end result of the bullying is that the person who is bullied ends up quitting or getting fired. So the price of bullying is huge. Something has to be done about it because the price in the workplace is expensive. This person says, my boss is a bully and lords his naturopathic medical doctor, NMD degree. I didn't know there was such a degree. And position in the company over me, because I'm just a lowly chiropractor, in ways that even other people in the office notice and often ask, why is he so mean to you? I understand that I do act like a victim and that he is definitely empty and afraid. I get that I have to learn how to be more loving than I've been, even when he chooses to act like an a-hole. A-hole, I assume that's like probably ant-hole. I don't want to feel helpless anymore in this situation. I attend a loving group and I've started to make phone calls to a Real Love coach and wise men and women. I'm reading the Real Love materials and I'm applying them in raising my 5-year-old son who responds to being loved beautifully. But I'm dealing with a grown man and I'm having a difficult time even seeing him, much less being loving toward him. Can you help me? Couple of things. And I want you to notice that when we talk about being loving, there's nothing weak about being unconditionally loving. A lot of people are under the hugely mistaken impression that to be loving is somehow weak or permissive, and it's not. I've sometimes said to people, do I strike you as a weak person? I haven't gotten a yes to that yet. You can be unconditionally loving and yet at the same time quite assertive. So first thing I would suggest is a change in perspective, and we'll get to the assertive part here in a minute. So first thing is to change the way you see this guy. You know, I can't remember where I was the other day, but this little kid came into the room, and he was 4 years old, and he came prancing into the room, and he said, I got the biggest star in the class. And he showed some little thing he'd gotten at school. And it was, I can't remember whether he had it on his shirt. And he said, I got the biggest star in the class. And all the adults in the room just sort of, chuckled at the, relative silliness, the relative smallness of a 4-year-old bragging that he got the biggest star in the class. You getting the picture of this? I mean, like, so what, right? Well, picture your boss doing that, because that's how silly it is that your boss brags about the fact that he has his naturopathic, that he has his NMD. Until today, I didn't know that an NMD existed. If that gives you a relative idea how important this is. I mean, even if I did know what it was, in the overall scheme of life, of what really matters, what is an NMD? I'm a medical doctor, and what is an MD? It's nothing. I was the top of my class in everything. I was the valedictorian and the top of my college class and the top of my medical school class. And in the overall scheme of things, in helping people be happy, in world peace, in what really matters. I mean, I got to the place with my medical doctor, with my MD, where I ended up with a gun to my head, sitting out here behind my house, right here. I was that unhappy. And clearly this guy is that unhappy, or he wouldn't have to brag about it. All the honors of men compared to genuine happiness mean nothing. And clearly this guy doesn't understand that, or he wouldn't be like a 4-year-old child who has to have a star on his chest, in this case his NMD, saying, look, I've got the biggest star in the class. I mean, it's embarrassing. Anybody who has to tell you about their awards, or tell you about their degrees, doesn't understand what they're about. So the first thing is a change in perspective. Seeing him as a 4-year-old with a big star on his forehead ought to help you in one huge measure to reevaluate who he is. And instead of being intimidated by him, to be embarrassed for him. I'm embarrassed for him as I read this. Every once in a while, as a group of physicians, we would have somebody, for example, we'd be in a hotel room, or be in a hotel lobby, and we'd see one of our compatriots, a fellow physician, walk up to the hotel clerk and introduce himself as Dr. something or other. And we'd look at each other and go, oh, how embarrassing. Anybody who has to introduce themselves as Dr. something is kind of missing the point. Now, the assertion part. A big part of this is you acting like a victim and you not having the guts to be yourself. So I'm guessing that it would help me if you're in the room to give me some examples of some of the things that he says. If you're here, it would be cool. In your absence, I'm going to provide some examples of things that self-important people say. But, you know, him with his degree, he would probably unavoidably say things like, in all of his knowledge, would say things like, well, can you not see that? Or it's obvious that, or, in my experience as a naturopathic medical doctor, I could, people who are self-important love to quote their experience, and they love to point out things that you don't know. And so when he says things like that, it's rather than let them go by and be offended by them, it's very useful if you simply stop him. Now, how do you stop somebody who's speaking? I have found it really useful to simply raise your hand. Almost everybody on the planet understands this symbol. Traffic stops when you do this. Teachers who are speaking will stop and call on you when you do this. It's a pretty universally understood symbol. And so here he is talking, and so you just raise your hand like this. Don't speak when you do it. You just raise your hand. People are puzzled when you do it, especially if there's just the two of you. So he's talking along, and he says, well, can you not see that? And you just raise your hand. He'll stop speaking. And you have to look at him right in the eye. You are intimidated by him. You are. And it's a reflection of the fact that you do feel like a victim. And you do feel like he's better than you are. Or all this wouldn't bother you. So you've got to get this 4-year-old with a star on his forehead thing across and not believe that he's better than you are. So you've got to get rid of this victimhood thing of yours before any of this is going to work. He cannot victimize you. He cannot victimize you unless you agree to be a victim. You can't do it. Nobody can offend me. It's impossible for somebody to offend me unless I agree to be offended. Can't be done. So when he says something like that, some little snotty thing, if you would like him to quit saying those little snotty things, all you have to do is raise your hand and then just ask. So, Dr. Snotty Mouth, you say, so that little phrase that you used just there, can you not see that? Help me understand what the role of that phrase is in what you were trying to show me. Now, he'll stutter and stumble like crazy because he'll realize that you've caught him with his pants down. It's horribly embarrassing as a bully to be caught naked in front of everybody. You like to get away with bullying people. And see, bullies like to intimidate and bother and punch people with there being no effects. They like there to be no price. They like to push people who never push them back. Now, mind you, you can't do this angry. If you do it angry, you will lose. So you just say, I'm trying to understand what the role of that phrase is. Oh, well, there's no role. No, you say, well, no, clearly there is, because you wouldn't use that phrase with, say, a peer, with somebody who was a fellow MD. So when you say, can you not see that, is there any particular reason you would use that phrase? Does it have a role to, like, help me learn better? Well, no, okay, I was just checking. You don't ever say, I would prefer that you not use it, because that puts you in a one-down position. You just say, oh, I was just checking to see if there was a role, if it was meant to help me in some way. I was just checking. And then you say, go ahead. Because, see, now he knows that you know. And now he's been exposed as a bully. And the next time he goes to do it, he'll think about it. And all you've done is show him that you're aware of it. You don't need to get him to stop it at all. There's nothing weak about being loving. And you just did it in a really nice way. And he's going to be mortally embarrassed. And he's going to think about it the next time. Oh, here's somebody. Here's the person that said that. I asked him to come to my office to review an article I needed to revise since I wanted to stay close to my space heater since I had been feeling under the weather. He said no. I asked why. He said because. I asked really. He said yes, and told me to bring my space heater to him. I felt I had to in order to avoid any retribution. Yes, playing the victim. Ah. I see. He said no. I get it. He said because. All right, so you just say, I need to stay close to my space heater because I've been feeling under the weather. And so you just say to him, so when it's convenient to you, let me know a time that you can come to my office. I look forward to having you come. You leave it there. You don't give him a chance to say no. And you don't be offended. You just say, I look forward to having you come. Or you say, what would be a convenient time to meet you in my office? And then when he says no, you say, so tell me what's wrong with my office. Make him state a reason. If he's going to be an arrogant bully, make him say why, not just because. But then don't be offended. You simply keep giving him opportunities to tell you why. If he's going to be arrogant and difficult, let him tell you why. Make sense? But then you can't feel victimized by it. Some people, if they want to be difficult and stinky, you have to let them be difficult and stinky. But give him an opportunity to explain the why. What a child. Just like some people in returning phone calls. Some people absolutely will not return phone calls. They are just selfish and spiteful, and they just won't do it. And you know what? They get to not do that. They get to be who they are. So remember, next week we're going to be meeting same time, 9 o'clock, and we're going to be meeting on Thursday, which is 2 days after New Year's Day. So I'll be seeing you a week from today on Thursday, and we look forward to seeing you. In the meantime, we love you tons. We'll see you then.